Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So EA has been releasing the top 10, pretty much every position in terms of what their attributes will be going into NHL 23. And today we're going to talk about the goaltenders they released. So they released their top 10 goaltenders. We're going to take a look at who is in the top 10, their attributes, X factors, all of that. As always, let me know if you agree or disagree in the comment section down below. And make sure you subscribe as we are entering into October. If you want to know the most up-to-date news, tips, and info in NHL 23, this is the place to do it. So make sure you subscribe. All right, let's get into the video. All right, guys, let's talk about the top 10 goaltenders. As you see here, we've got the list for this year's game, and I think outside of the top two, Vasilevskiy and Shesterkin, we're at a point where goaltenders are being propped up for prior performances, like John Gibson, and have struggled lately, as well as guys that have performed well recently, but their track record is kind of rocky, like Jacob Markstrom and Freddie Anderson for the most part. But we'll start down at the bottom. We've got Sergei Bobrovsky at number 10, and man, it is awfully rough because I understand why Florida had to go out and sign him for that insane deal, for that $10 million contract, because they really just wanted to make a push and kind of show the NHL and their fan base that they meant business. He is not worth $10 million, and he is the reason why they lost Mackenzie Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau. Not that Matthew Tkachuk isn't probably the best player among them, but losing Mackenzie Weegar and Huberdeau combined, I think in the short term is going to be worse than it is better with Matthew Tkachuk. And I think this is probably the last year that he's inside the top 10 because there's a goalie on his team that's probably better and will take over the reins, and that's Spencer Knight. Moving up, Ilya Sorokin, if I were to hazard a guess as a dark horse to win the Vezina, is probably Sorokin. The New York Islanders have been a pretty boring team in terms of offense. They play a really heavy defensive game, and if the Islanders are going to perform well this season, it's going to be on the back of Ilya Sorokin, and I think that's within the realm of outcomes with him performing phenomenally. I think that he moves up next year. Freddie Anderson, man, it's brutal with the injury that happened last playoffs because the Carolina Hurricanes might have been able to go on a cup run. I think that if he stays healthy this year and repeats his Jennings Trophy season, I think he's going to be one of the best, maybe top 5, top 6 goaltenders in the NHL. Juuse Saros in at number 7. He was really the main reason the Nashville Predators were able to do what they did. I remember them going into last season, they were making trades trying to get rid of, Ryan Johansson, as well as make some moves to offload some of their better players like Ryan Ellis, and it looked like they were just not going to be a playoff team, but Juuse Saros, Yossi, and Duchesne's insane shooting percentage carried them into the playoffs, and I think that number 7 and 89 overall rating for Juuse Saros is pretty deserved. Thatcher Demko, another one I think that will sneak into the top 5 next year. He has been phenomenal ever since his coming out party in the COVID bubble season. In the playoffs, he's been an incredible goaltender, and I think Vancouver does have the pieces in the Pacific Division to make the playoffs this year. I think Thatcher Demko is going to be a huge reason for it. And man, can you imagine if Thatcher Demko and Jacob Markstrom were still on Vancouver? Like, they would have the best goaltender pairing in the NHL. John Gibson. I have been a big John Gibson truther over the last 5-6 years because I get to see him a lot as a Sharks fan, and he's been a phenomenal goaltender. I know the Ducks have not been very good recently, but his analytics and save percentage are just awful now. He is legit a 90 overall rating because of his past performances 5 years ago, essentially. I don't see how John Gibson is in the top 5 next year, and I'd be stunned if he doesn't drop to almost number 10 or out of the top 10. I mean, that's my bold take going into this year. You've got Jacob Markstrom at 90 overall for the Calgary Flames. He's been incredible, and I think he is kind of that next tier after the top 3. I think he does lead that next second wave of goaltenders, him and Demko. And I think he's going to do fine in Calgary this year. And I think top 4, he'll be a top 5 goaltender next year. Connor Hellebuyck is the best goaltender on a bad team. And the Jets, I don't think will get better this year. He's going to have a Vezina Trophy season for them. I think that they're just kind of aging themselves out. I think it's going to be a transition year for the Jets. I still think that he is among the best goaltenders in the NHL. And then we'll get down to the argument of Shesterkin and Vasilevskiy. So a lot of Ranger fans are kind of wondering why Shesterkin is not number 1 and Vasilevskiy is. Here's the reason why. Attributes in EA NHL, they take recency bias into account, maybe not enough, but they take 3-year averages, right? So if you were to go back 3 years, obviously Vasilevskiy is still number 1 because, well, Shesterkin has only been around for about 2 seasons now. I'll be honest with you, if Shesterkin has the same season that he did last year or even just remotely close, I don't see how he's not number 1 next year, but these two are clearly the tier above everybody else. Vasilevskiy at number 1, I have no problems with this. I have a feeling that next year we're going to get a new number 1 in Shesterkin, but we'll let it play out. I think that this is a fine list. I don't really have any complaints in terms of goaltenders that were left off. I think Bobrovsky could be maybe exchanged for a bunch of other goaltenders, but I think this is his last year in the top 10. Now, taking a look at the website of the top 50 players, it does feature some of the goaltenders, and I'm not certain that the X Factors are finished on the website, because there's a few that don't have X Factors that simply they cannot not have them in NHL 23. So Freddie Anderson, while among some of the best goaltenders in the game, he does not have one. He's got post to post though, and is probably going to be a strong contender as one of the best goaltenders early on. With his card, he's probably going to be cheap. Goaltenders and base cards in Hockey Ultimate Team are usually pretty cheap, so I could see that being a pretty good target early on. After him, next up, we got UC Saros, who does have gold post to post, so obviously he was not an X Factor the prior year in terms of having a gold zone ability. He looks like he might be an X Factor in NHL 23. Smaller goaltender, which is awfully tough in Hockey Ultimate Team. However, they made up for it with giving him post to post, because I think that saves most of the small goaltenders. I still think he's a little too small for how Hockey Ultimate Team plays, but he does have a good zone ability. John Gibson up at 89, as you see here, not an X Factor, doesn't have post to post. He is always someone who plays well in games, so keep that in mind, but as of launch or as of this list, it doesn't look like he has an X Factor, but things could change. Jacob Markstrom has gold dialed in, so he is an X Factor at launch of NHL 23. No post to post, and I'd be pretty stunned if they give anyone that has decent size post to post, as it was, such an impact stat last year. So I'm okay with that. Connor Hellebuck's up next. He doesn't have a gold zone ability, and I don't see how he did anything to lose his X Factor status going into this year. I mean, he's still the third highest rated goaltender. He had a fine season, but I don't know if the X Factors are more recency bias than what their actual overall is, and that might make a little bit of sense. And then the reason why I don't think that this list is accurate is Igor Shesterkin doesn't have a zone ability. There is no way that Igor Shesterkin, who had an MVP type season, carried the Rangers to the conference final, does not have a gold zone ability. He's got Contortionist, Whirlwind, and post to post. Obviously, he's not one of the giant goaltenders, so I would be stunned if he is not a gold play. He does not have a gold zone ability and an X Factor specifically in Hockey Ultimate Team. And then Vasilevsky, he looks like he is going to stay exactly the same. He's 94 overall, has the gold Contortionist ability. And I won't lie, I know goaltenders are always different for everyone, but the masses, his team of the year card, with all of the crazy abilities and like that, was not very good. It was kind of underwhelming. So I don't know if it's going to change this year depending on how goaltenders play. It does look like they cover the cross ice pass a little bit better, but they give up snipes a lot more, so we'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, he does have the gold Contortionist ability. So guys, there are your top 10 goaltenders going into NHL 23. Any other news and info about released players and ratings, I'll be sure to get it to you, so make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.